Let's turn our attention to this now. France and the United Kingdom are the latest countries planning to formally recognize the State of Palestine. Canada has also expressed its willingness to recognize the Palestinian statehood. Joining us right now is Professor Anthoni van Nieuwkerk, who's a professor of international and diplomacy studies, to give us his perspective. He joins us from Unisa. Prof, good to have you on the show this evening. Firstly, how would you contextualize the UK's decision to indeed recognize Palestine now, especially given its historical role through the Balfour Declaration?
Yeah, no, indeed. Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity. I read the Balfour Declaration earlier tonight to refresh my memory. It was produced in 1927, I think, where the British made a pledge to give the Jewish nation, a property, a land in Palestine, without taking away the rights and obligations of the Palestinians. And I think maybe history is catching up with the British, because it's now time for them to make good on that undertaking to allow the Palestinians a state. But you have to ask why now, and also why the British Prime Minister made it conditional. He said, we will recognize Palestine as an independent sovereign state under the condition that that Israel stop the violence in Gaza. And I was hoping to hear from the British that they would say, in principle, we support the idea of an independent Palestine. I think the broader context or the perspective here really is that many countries in the West who have been supportive of the Netanyahu government's attempts to eliminate Hamas in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, have come to the realization that it is a war that has lost its humanity, that the extent of the violence perpetrated by the Israeli Defense Force can no longer be justified, even if you acknowledge and recognize October 7 and what Hamas did in invading Israel. And I think more and more countries in the West are coming around to the point where they realize that it is necessary now to put pressure on the Israeli government and its allies, the Americans, but also some European countries, Germany comes to mind, in order to force the situation, to end the indescribable horror of the war in Gaza, and also to get a process going to reach some kind of a peace or a ceasefire that can then introduce a process whereby ideally the two sides can be given the opportunity to have independent, sovereign, safe and secure spaces to live in.
Right.
That is the so-called two-state solution. And I must say that the UN had a week or two ago, had a big conference boycotted by Israel and by the Americans. Nevertheless, if you consider that there's 194 members of the international community who belongs to the United Nations, about 140 are now in favor of this move to find a way to force the Israelis and the Americans to come to some kind of a peace table.
Prof, very quickly, with the little time that we have left, what do you think South Africans should take from these developments as well, from our view?
I think our government was morally justified and quite courageous to take steps to take Israel to the International Court of Justice, to stand trial, as it were, for the accusation of a possible genocide. And at the time, many people said that South Africa is taking a huge risk. It will be punished. The South African government, or the ANC in particular, will be punished by doing so. But I think in hindsight, South Africa did the right thing, because many countries are now beginning to realize that this step of putting pressure on Israel to take responsibility for its acts of violence in the Gaza and against the Palestinians is the right and the morally right choice to make. And so for me, with all the troubles that South Africa has with the Trump administration, this is the one point in our foreign policy that I regard as a highlight.
Professor Anthony, thank you so much for your time, giving us his perspective on this developing story.